Welcome back, Irish Granny Tarot. This is our Saturday book, and this is video number 6 on our book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness by Moulton Howe. And go back 2 weeks for the first 2 videos, go back 1 week, Saturday, for the second 2 videos. Just uploaded video number 5. This is video number 6. And we are starting Chapter 3, Other Beings, Other Worlds. And I'm going to throw this out here as we approach the end of this book. She comes to some really startling conclusions that you don't hear a lot in early UFO speculation. So if you're interested at all in watching physics and metaphysics intersect, I would recommend you stick with this, if for no other reason but to hear the conclusion that physicists and Moulton Howe come to. So we're going to start out here with Chapter 3, Other Beings, Other Worlds, and this is a quotation from Jim Sparks, an abductee in 96. He says, higher intelligence takes advantage of and uses lower intelligence the way we humans use cattle. And with the privilege of use comes the responsibility of caring for it. A farmer tends to his animals by feeding them and taking care of their medical needs. If the pasture became contaminated, the farmer would be the first to protect his investment. And he's talking about alien interaction with humans. And so we have this. In 1995, Moulton Howe met a man named Jim Sparks, and this is Howe speaking, who says he has had completely conscious encounters with small gray drone worker types, taller true aliens or supervisors, and tall reptoids with big human-shaped bodies covered with scaly reptile skin. Like Sergeant Jim Peniston in Chapter 1 of the book, Sparks sees himself as an interpreter or a translator or at least an elementary grade student in an alien school. Sparks says he's been forced to learn English letter and number equivalents to alien symbols. He permitted Howe to tape record hours of their discussions about his experiences. This chapter emerged from those conversations and his efforts to visualize and write down what has happened for his own book manuscript. So we'll talk about this guy, Sparks, born November 15th, 1954, graduated high school in Florida, went into real estate, and in 1988, at the age of 34, in North Carolina, he was a contractor on his own subdivided land. Bought it, subdivided it, supervised building houses. He had his first encounter. He thought that he was losing his mind. He felt physically pulled out of bed. But this happened to him many times. He would wake at 3 o'clock in the morning with a whirring sensation inside his body and his heart racing and a scream in his head, and he would feel pulled down. He would black out and awaken on board a UFO. He believes that they were using technology to walk him through walls, and he senses that they were working with energy fields. So we're talking about changing the vibration of a three-dimensional solid human being into something that can walk through solid objects. He felt that the wall got transparent. He said he made a huge effort. He decided right away, if this was not him losing his mind, then he made a huge effort to not be scared to death and to figure out what it was, what was going on. All the communication that he had was thought activated. He saw very complex computers. Now, mind you, this is in the 80s, and am I right? 88? Yeah, 88. Pre-public being conversant with, telephones that are computers. This is a new technology to him. He said the ETs were using their minds to put symbols in light on walls of his living room, and that the symbols would float around. So we're talking maybe a holograph or something. A woman named Anna Hayes wrote a book called Voyagers, the Sleeping Abductees. It's early on in the story. And she claimed that non-human intelligence tried to teach her the technology, tried to teach her the technology and what was going on in relationship to the cosmos. And she says that Spark's feeling of being pulled down is the transmission of cellular code into the DNA. It's a technology that transforms the body into light and reassembles it at its destination. He was literally beamed aboard. It manipulates the cellular code. It uses something that I can't read. Sound. Uses sound to change the vibration, the vibratory oscillation rate of DNA and the cells. So UFOs meet plasma physics. This is what we're talking about, quantum physics, basically. Thoughts become electromagnetic pulses, and they become electromagnetic transmissions, and then they're used by the ETs for biotechnology. I'm sure this is a vast oversimplification, but that's basically the story. On board this UFO, Spark's task was to learn to read and write alien symbols. At first, he was only able to move his right hand and arm, but he paralyzed with fear, and they kind of overcame that for him so that he could learn these symbols. Telepathically, he heard and saw on the screen before him this foreign language, and at first he was enraged. He was just really angry. And he was told in his head telepathically, you will learn this. And he was really resisting, and he was told, no, you're going to learn this. And he was shown how to make their letter A, and he said no. And when he said no in his head, then the air pressure around him became dramatically pressured, really high pressure. He felt a jolt of adrenaline, and he got really scared and uncomfortable. And the ETs increased this until he was afraid he was going to die. He made their letter A, and as a result, he felt euphoria. All the pressure went away, and he felt euphoria. And he said he was, like a lab animal. If he cooperated, he got pleasure. If he didn't cooperate, he got fear and agony. And eventually, he learned this bizarre alien form of, writing form was an alphabet. Where am I here? 7. Probably help if I put my glasses on. And this is a description of what it was like. You see ABC, and they showed him what you'll be seeing is there's a way to form these letters. I don't know if anybody remembers. We learned printing and then cursive in school as children. It's not taught the same way anymore, is my impression. But when we learned cursive, they actually showed you exactly where to start on the piece of paper with your pencil and what direction to go in and what line to end at and then what direction. And they created muscle memory by having you do it over and over and over, and that's exactly what happened. They showed him, you start on this side and draw it here, and then you saw it this side and you go back and you go, and they directed him in that way. And that should sound familiar to anybody who remembers the old-fashioned way of learning how to write. I don't know. So this is ABC, and then this is their weird alphabet, and they kind of show them how to go about putting it together. And then this is the entire alphabet that he was forced to learn. So he learned the alien symbols, and he realized it was a language. It's read from right to left and from the bottom up. You needed to see it in 3 dimensions to really get what you were looking at and to do it right. And each letter is written differently in all 3 dimensions. And this is where they lose me because my sense of spatial relationships is just abysmal. But okay, I believe him. They laid the symbols on top of each other, and it created a black spot, and he could differentiate the symbols from residual motion, whatever that means. Sparks was basically, he said, in an elementary school for telepathic communication. The motion of the letter, the motion actually created a vibration, and you would get the meaning from that vibration. He feels that repeatedly drawing the symbol awakened the muscles in his mind. And like I just said, muscle memory and learning how to write cursive, this takes it up to a whole other plane, but it's the same concept. It's training in telepathy. So he had lessons on a regular basis, was abducted and had lessons from 1988 to 1995. He learned the letters, then he learned the numbers, he learned phrases and symbols, and then he kind of achieved a new level. And in the next session, written on the wall, he saw the life of a friend. And he was able to read the whole thing, but not only could he read the life of the friend, he was able to see into the future. And okay, so that was written in English for him to understand. And then they put it side by side with the same words, but in the alien language. And he was able to read it because the ET letters actually contained information in a condensed form that he picked up on because he had achieved some new vibratory telepathic ability. That's all I can understand. He was able to condense 20 pages. They, doing this, were able to condense 20 pages of English to half a page of alien. Then he was shown a page with one symbol, and it held word for word the entire 20 pages of English, and he was able to read it in seconds. He didn't know how. He can't explain it, but that's what happened. They could put symbols randomly in the air, and he got what they were trying to tell him. He learned not to try too hard. If he tried too much and too hard, it was actually counterproductive. He picked a spot and focused on that one spot and took one small thing at a time, and he got better. It wasn't perfect, but he got better at it. To get his full ability to communicate, he needed to be in their environment using their equipment. There was no other option. They only have 6 numbers, which is really interesting because who had a base 6 number system? The Sumerians. Remember them? Zechariah Sitchin, Enki, and, the Nibiru, the planet that exploded and formed the Milky Way, that whole story. Base 6 number system, which is why we have 360 degrees in a circle. And where am I going here? Distracting myself. Now, what did I want to show here? Oh, basically, this is how they went about it. He saw a lot of symbols. Then they condensed it, and he was able to read all the information from here was in here. And then eventually all that information was condensed down, and then eventually it was just a few symbols and contained all the information. Howe took this picture I just showed you of the 4 different graduated writing things and sent it to a clinical psychologist in abnormal psychology and sensory neurophysiology. She's not gullible. She approaches it like a scientific problem. So this guy, this expert, has studied many such symbols from abductees since the 1980s, starting with Betty Andreasen. If you remember, we did her book. So these samples are a combination of alien scripts, and they're put in a form that humans might understand. So what he figured out was this may not be the original thing that the aliens do, but what they've done is modify their script that humans can relate to it at all. He said there's three forms of writing. There's geometrics, dots, and shorthand that are being put to use here. And he says they look like our alphabet in a weird way. And in our alphabet, one symbol equals one sound. And they equal human sounds, and even different human languages don't necessarily do this. So it's not, I don't know how to explain it. And what this expert wanted to know was, are these ETs tailoring their systems specifically for Sparks, his language skills, his understanding of the written word? The expert suspected that the ET symbols were on purpose made to resemble our corresponding letters at first to begin the process of learning them. He says the system has what are called follows that occur on fake earthbound made-up scripts. B follows A, C follows B. It's a logical progression that we've been trained from the earliest time to comprehend. It's very earth-based. So his question is, well, was this made up by people, or is this actually ETs accommodating an ET human interface? It's very clever. It's modifying their written word, which is so much more than just a written word, but it's modifying it so that humans can even relate to it at all. And do these similarities serve the purpose for further ET interaction with humans? And, it's a very pragmatic thing that they're doing. He said some of these letters look like ancient Greek. So at first he thought, oh, this is made up, So then he did further analysis. He looked at shorthand script because it's more complex, and it made him eliminate a lot of the doubts and criticisms that he had. He says that this guy's script that he brought back from the aliens is very similar to script brought back from other abductees. Widely divergent sources, people completely unaware of each other, different time periods, different parts of the globe, and yet they come with this weird similarity in what they've learned. Here's the script written by Betty Andreasen. So it does kind of look like shorthand, and it kind of does look like a foreign language. It looks almost Arabic, and it looks like shorthand, and it looks like a secret code, but it's intentionally kind of like that because that's something that feels familiar to the human brain. What it doesn't have is a one-to-one letter sound. It doesn't have a linear sense. It has a what he called a gestalt of meaning. So when you look at these letters, you're not reading them in a line and putting sounds together and making words. You're looking at the letter, and a fully formed thought is put into your head. And it requires a 3D approach to fully understand it. He said the only thing that he could think of that was similar was the story of an Enochian angelic language. And let me tell you what that means. I thought this was fascinating. Aleister Crowley. It's kind of really peculiar. We're talking about aliens and ETs and UFOs, and we've so far covered crop circles, abductions of people, beams of light, mutilated animals, and physics, particle physics. And now, what are we talking about? Aleister Crowley. It's just incredible how these things basically all tie together. Historically, some so-called magical scripts or sigils are said to require a three-dimensional conceptualizing. In a conversation with an assistant to Aleister Crowley, who was a member of the Order of the Golden Dawn and leader of the Ordo Temporalis Orientalis, Order of the Eastern Temple, in the early to middle 20th century, it was mentioned that some portions of the Enochian chessboards used in the Enochian system of magic were to be seen in 3 dimensions. Aleister Crowley followed the directions of Queen Elizabeth I's court astrologer, John Dee, who was purported to be a magician and engaging in the black arts, who said he received the Enochian system from a luminous being. Crowley and Dee understood that 3 dimensions were necessary in order to visualize properly the symbols needed to contact otherworldly entities. So now we're dragging in Queen Elizabeth I. Fascinating. Are other abductees told that alien script is multi-leveled to read? Yes, they are. And they could pass their finger over it. And as they pass their finger over it, a fully formed thought is produced in their head like they were reading a script, only it's going from their fingertip to their brain immediately. A repeated finger passes over the same script increases the complexity of understanding, the level of knowledge. So this neuroscientist's conclusion is that Sparks' script does not follow common earthbound hoaxes. Now, this is a guy, an expert on the brain and an expert in psychology, and he's saying, okay, this is not a hoax. This is a complex system that may be intentionally modified to link dissimilar minds. Food for thought. So, this is part 3 of her whole analysis here. The analysis of members. It's an odd system maybe for advanced cultures, but they don't have a 0. The numbers that they use, they don't have a 0. The Romans had a 0, which makes it much easier to compute. It's hard to calculate things if you don't have a concept of 0. The Mayans had 0. The Arabs had 0. People like Western tradition Romans, they didn't have 0. And 6 is a really odd base. In the book here, she discusses various base systems, the pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages. And it's really technical, it's really detailed, and it's almost impossible to synopsize. So I'm just going to say that she does discuss this, and it's interesting. You should read the book. Definitely get this book. Definitely put your name in for the drawing. And she's throwing out this question, so does this relate to the sides of a cube with 0 at the center? This is what people who've studied this are beginning to contemplate. She cites something called the Meru Project by Stan Teniu. A tube torus, Torus, in a tetrahedron rotated casts a shadow on a 2-dimensional surface that forms all Hebrew letters and in order when you shine a light through it. And by changing the shape's position, you're able to get all the Greek letters as you move the light in different places. And then if you move that again and shine a light on it and look in different places, you get all the Arabic letters. And when I say move, they move the position of the torus inside the tetrahedron, and then they pour a light on it. So this is all gobbledygook. For me it was anyway. I had no idea what they were talking about. The tetrahedron is a shape that contains 27 primary symmetrical positions. And this guy studied them and discovered that putting these two shapes together actually produced letters in different alphabets, and depending on how you oriented the shapes in relationship to each other, gave you different languages. So this is basically, it's in a book. It's hard to draw this, but this is basically the shape he's talking about, a torus inside a tetrahedron. And this is an explanation of it, which was virtually incomprehensible to me. I sat and read this and I thought, how am I going to make this make sense? It's the Meru Project, but by Stan Tenen. And yeah, it's complicated. Then there's a picture here. This is Betty Andreasen's daughter. And in her story, Betty Andreasen's daughter, in 1989, taken on board a UFO, sat at a console and traced ET symbols with her fingers on the ET's machines, and a ball of light would pop out in front of her with a picture. And there's no answer to this question, but the question was, what were they training her for? They were training her. What were they training her for? She was never hurt. I mean, other than the trauma psychologically, they were taken at night, sat down in front of this thing, and put through their paces of learning. And what? Why? Jim Sparks confronted aliens and said, I won't write more until you tell me why me. I want to know what's going on here. And they paralyzed his mouth when he said no. And he asked why again, and they showed him the image of two cops. And the ET in his head then showed him the image of two generals. And he still refused. So it was like a standoff. They kept upping the authority figures. They thought they were challenging him in his head. Well, I'll tell you why cops are coming. I'll tell you why the generals, the military, we're sending in the army. And finally, the big boss, E.T., came in. And John could really sense this guy had power and he was in charge. And he felt it in his head. And he was told by this guy, this big boss, you write what you're told to write, and we will answer you. We will tell you. So he wrote in Alien, why me? And he shocked himself. He shocked the aliens. Everybody was like, oh, he got it. It's like Henry Higgins. He was shown a 3D holograph of World War II. And then a late 1800s factory owner. He saw himself in the who he recognized had to be himself in this World War II scene. He saw himself as the factory owner. Then he was shown a small seashore village in the 16 or 1700s and saw a farmer in a field and knew that it was him. And let me see if I'm going to read this. Oh, these are just the pictures. So he's, shown the factory, shown the field, shown himself. We'll talk about this here in a second. And eventually shown, looks like Romans, and then it looks like a very primitive, some sort of primitive primate. Jim asked, have you been following my family line? Is that what you're trying to tell me? So when he wrote the question in the alien language, they said, yes, they're tempting him. It's how you inspire children, get them to do what they like to do, right? He got him to write his questions to them in their language. They answered him. They said yes. He saw a medieval scene, the people drinking around a table, and he saw that he was probably himself there, and he saw himself in a Roman Senate sort of situation, and then an ape-like creature on the savannah, and he got angry and he rejected this implication because what they were telling him was they created people and supervised the evolution. Anne Hayes, the other woman who wrote that other book, experienced the same sort of 3D training and holographic communication. She said it's a small part of a complex technology that manipulates the forces of even atoms and photons. She thinks that Sparks was shown his soul family lineage. And she believes the ETs monitor our souls. Now here we are into spirituality. They monitor our souls. There's a spirit matrix, and they monitor that and our DNA. And she believes the ETs often leave fully coded messages inside our DNA to be retrieved later by humans who are ready and able. So the very fact of hearing this, the fact of reading this book, and not immediately dismissing it as outrageous, means that something in your DNA has been activated and you're ready to even consider or contemplate this information, which I think is really fascinating, because how random is that, really? It feels very random, and it's not random at all. So these positive ETs, they want to share information. They want to communicate with us, but we are physiologically and spiritually, according to this book, not evolved. And so some people have been taken. Their DNA has been manipulated. Spiritually, they have been downloaded with information. And as our consciousness raises, our DNA kicks in and our understanding increases. But there are problems with negative ETs too. They're not benign and they're not neutral. They're only concerned with their own survival and in what ways we pragmatically can help them. They also manipulate and encode and access the DNA of certain humans. So how to tell the distinction, the difference, that's hard. Jim tells of being taken by the ETs at night, and it describes an exam room like an airplane hangar with guards that look like U.S. military, and in pods, a man and a woman. And so I want to show you that picture because it's easier just to show it to you than it is to explain it. But this is not all of the pictures in this book, and I really urge people, if you're interested, to buy this book. Look at how beautiful, look at how detailed. So this is what he sees. This is where he was taken. He says men in lab coats with aliens beside them used a rod to keep him quiet, and he suddenly found himself, just like pointed it, found himself sitting quietly. He blacked out and he woke to see that these pods were empty. And on the tables, there was a table. He was examined by an ET and a man. There was sort of a shape-shifting going on with this individual ET man. And Jim said he felt drugged. He felt maybe not necessarily chemical drugs in it, but he felt like he'd been drugged. He was told to sit up and he was lectured. He heard it, he understood everything he was told, and he doesn't remember any of it. He was told, read The Roman by Mika Waltare, W-A-L-T-A-R-E. And I looked it up, and it's a book. It's been so long since I looked it up, I can't remember what it's about. It's a novel, but it's a novel that has to do with this ET stuff. I don't do fiction. It's too hard to synopsize fiction. Should look into it. So this hangar door where he was opened onto a desert-like area. He said it was kind of like Las Vegas desert. He blacked out again and he woke up at home, and he saw marks, red marks, where he was stung with that rod that controlled him. And a friend of his confirms he had fresh scars on his hands that looked like small burns that he would not discuss where they came from. So this is sort of an implication that part of the government was working out. Mind you, this is from this book. I'm not alleging anything. This is not information that I'm advocating. I'm telling the story of the book. That he was... implies the government working with ETs, but to what degree, for how long, how many layers of government. And the book that they recommended was kind of implying it went all the way back at least to the Romans. And it was about a Roman, big shot Roman, who was seduced by greed, lust, and power. And the question posed here is, was that book merely recommended because it shows how a culture devolves and is history repeating itself? I think it showed part of the fall of the Roman Empire now that I think about it. Jim saw that he descended from those errors and he had a chance to do better. This had to do with genetic memory and not reincarnation, which comes up in a later chapter. We'll talk more about this. That the ETs are tracking DNA through family lines, like continuing chapters, just to gather knowledge. Jim says that they form our raw materials, our bodies, for many reasons. They had created worker greys as commodities. Jim believes that we were ET hybrids. This is what he's saying in the book, that we were ET hybrids, that ETs follow genetic lines. They're interested in reproductive materials to create androids and hybrids. He's seen rows of greys laid out like an assembly line. And these are those biotechnical android type things. And so it's important to remember there are different kinds of greys. There are the ones that they believe are androids manufactured like this. There are some that they believe are maybe a combo. And then there are some who are really beings, biological entities. I'm getting the hiccups, I'm sorry. So we saw them laid out like in an assembly line. Interesting, this next statement. The ETs take our emotions to put in these biological android things. Hybrids that are part us may have to populate the Earth someday. The android greys slightly resemble us and their creator aliens. The real aliens have more distinct and individual features. They look more like individuals, and they radiate an energy that is overwhelming. The worker greys don't. They're kind of muted in their affect. Jim says he avoids eye contact because once he kicked one and it reacted against him in an energetic way that overwhelmed him. He had thousands of thoughts in his head in a second. He says he's seen symbols and had his entire life flash before his eyes in a second. Near-death experience stuff we got going on here now too. In 1995, Jim was given the job by the aliens of calming humans who were taken in a big multiple abduction. There was an encounter with reptilians, and he got their warning and possible agenda. He was awoken in the night and pulled, but for the first time he saw where he was going. He went 10,000 feet above the ground, slowly down carried up 10,000 feet, and then slowly brought down to an abandoned carnival park. He floated over a wooden roller coaster, but he wasn't scared. He was 20 or 30 feet above it, and he began to rock like a pendulum. He blacked out inches from the ground, so before he actually touched down. When he awoke, he got telepathic stuff going on here. The only bad thing I can say about this book is it's so heavy and so big, it's unwieldy, but it's worth every ounce because there's so much interesting stuff in it. So this is him coming back into consciousness. He heard telepathically, quote, "We would have given it to you, but we knew it wouldn't have meant anything unless you earned it. It was the only way you could possibly understand what you have been a part of and what you have to do." And he now knows that by it, they meant knowledge. And this is the story of what happens when he comes to. He sees 12 large humanoids in a circle at least 6 feet tall. And there's a guy next to him with a human face, but it's masking a reptile face for his own benefit, because they knew that he would be completely freaked out. I have to show you the picture. I can't believe I closed the book. So all the reptile faces in a circle, and this is the human face. And he's got that righteous mullet going on too. Okay. Where are we here? So this is reptile face radiating light, and there's telepathic communication. They all think with the same mind at the same time. And this is what he's told. Quote, "There's some things you need to understand. Yes, it's true that we've been in contact with your government leaders and heads of power. It's also true that agreements have been made and kept secret from your people. It's also true that in the past, some of your people have lost their lives or been badly hurt to protect this secret. Our hands had no part in this. We contacted your leaders because your planet is in grave trouble. Your leaders said the vast majority of your population wasn't ready for anything like us yet. So we made time agreements with your leaders as to when your people would be made aware of our presence. This part of the agreement has not been kept. It was also agreed that in the meantime, steps would be taken to correct the environmental conditions of your planet with our advice and technology. We say advice because we respect the fact that this is your planet, not ours. Your government also broke this agreement." So there's a little bit of a conversation goes on, and then Jim asks them, "Are you giving up on us?" And this is how they respond. "No. We're now concentrating our energy on the average person. Your air, water are contaminated. Your forests, jungles, trees, and plant life are dying. There are several breaks in your food chain. You have an overwhelming amount of nuclear and biological weapons, which include nuclear and biological contamination. Your planet is overpopulated. Warning, it's almost to the point of being too late unless your people act now. There are better ways of deriving your energy and food needs without causing your planet any damage. Those in power are aware of this and have the capability to put these methods into worldwide use." And he asks, why aren't they doing it now? And these guys say they need to give these leaders amnesty to come forward with the truth. They're afraid now. At this point, they've kept it for a secret so long, they're afraid of the backlash if they tell the truth. And he asks, why aren't we putting these methods to use? And they say those in power view the technology for clean energy and abundant food as a military and security threat. And we need to give them amnesty so that they don't fear to come forward. And he says, well, how do I fit in? What on earth can I do? And they tell him, what you are doing already is what you can do. We will share much more knowledge with you in the future. Although you understand a lot, we will show you much more. Continue to work with people that come to you. We're aware of the small groups that are forming around the world. These are people who are prepared to learn, and we consider them the core. Most important is the condition of your planet. The first step in solving this serious problem is amnesty. We have advice, and you will receive more knowledge in the near future. Okay. He said that, this is interesting. I've forgotten about this because it's been a while since I read this. He says that around this time when they're having this conversation, it started to rain. And what he noticed was they didn't get wet. It was raining, but they didn't get wet. So he asked to see what they looked like, and he was told it would strike fear in your heart. And they showed him. There was a huge light kind of opened up on them, and they were reptiles. They were huge reptiles. And he says they're not benevolent, and they're not evil. They've been with us for millennia. The government knows about it. The planet is in trouble. We have been a crop for them, and their investment in their crop is in trouble. And, the book lists all the environmental problems, and I won't belabor it, but since we're on the subject, I hope everybody saw what's been going on at this climate change summit, the head of which is a CEO of a big oil, one of the third biggest oil producing group, came out and said the other day, we really don't have to worry about oil contributing problems. This is what he said. It's not what I believe. That's misinformation, because we all know that's not true. Motivation is money. We did cards on it. Complete lack of concern for the environment. So he's told that most of us are blind or numb, and if we ignore it and die out, the ETs have collected insurance. They have our DNA, it's like seeds from the earth, and they will simply start over. Anna Hayes, that other book, adds that some ETs don't want us to succeed because if we did, they could no longer exploit the earth. And if we knew all of this, we would change and evolve as a species. So now we know. This is actually just spelling it out, clear as a bell. In conversation, Hayes told Howe negative and positive agendas are producing hybrids and androids, and both sides are emphasizing the need to save the Earth's environment, but for their various vested interests. Guardian aliens are promoting healing the planet. The negative groups are also trying to help the planet by offering new technologies so they can have a clean place to take over. I understand the negative ones have had time agreements with the U.S. government about introducing their species to humans. Lately, I think the negative ones have told the government they will introduce themselves to the public if the government does not. So the government is supposedly setting the stage to introduce the negative ones, and the negative aliens are planning to help the government clear its reputation by staging false events with holographic inserts. Human minds will not be able to tell what's real and what's not. Yikes. Where are we here? So Jim had a night visit in March of 95. He was shown Rome and a forest burning, and he was told, you must put out the fire. He didn't know how. In 95, he was told we would have a decade. So 2005. Or the problem won't be able to be reversed. And the reptoid said someone in political power already has this knowledge and technology, and they're hoarding it for security and defense reasons, and probably for greed too, do you think? So Jim asked why him. He has no power, and he's figured out that there are probably millions like him. The aliens may... they may intervene for their own self-interest. The Earth will be okay eventually. Humans, not so much. So Jim asked, I said, I didn't ask for this, and I didn't want anything to do with it, and I'm not real thrilled that this is where I am, but this is where I am, and that's why he agreed to talk to Howe, because he knew that she had the ability to make it more public. So here we are at the end of that chapter and the end of video 6. And we'll be back, and I think there's a lot here to process, to digest, to accept. And like I said, what's going to become apparent very quickly as we move to the end of the book is the intersection of physics and the paranormal metaphysics, philosophy, ETs, Sasquatch, Aleister Crowley. It's all converging in this gigantic Venn diagram with a common core. And it's all about evolving spiritually, which sounds very, metaphysical and religious and touchy-feely, except it's not. It is just reality. So we'll move forward. We'll continue with this book. This is a fabulous book. I'm going to say right away, I envy whoever gets their name pulled. I'm going to raffle off both volumes. It's very exciting. I'm excited for you, but my kids don't want these books. I'm not going to live forever. I've read them several times now, and I think it's time to reward the people who sit and listen to these videos and, who hint, donate to the book fund, which allows us to do more books. But I just think this book is intended to be passed along. It's really important. So get your name in there in the comments, and we'll do it I don't know. I can't predict 100%, probably next week, but I'm not promising. We'll see how quickly we can go through the remaining part of the book. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. You'll be okay. Don't be afraid to go to sleep. You'll be okay. Sleep well. And we'll be back. Slán go fóill. Sláinte.